Even before evidence emerged, it was well known there was corruption in FIFA, and many countries used it to their advantage. In 2010, for the first time, there was a vote on 2 World Cup hosts. The vulnerability of this double bidding process encouraged unethical conduct. The high risk of hosting the World Cup in countries such as Russia and Qatar should have made their victory unlikely. Yet both these countries won the auction for the beautiful game. How?
How is the question, and the panel who are going to help us to tackle some of those issues I can announce now. I'm not going to read through my introduction again because I think we've got a much neater summary of it there. But let me introduce our 4 panelists. You will realize as I give a brief potted biography as to why they absolutely have to be up here on the stage. I'd like first of all to introduce Harold Mayne-Nichols, who's a Chilean former journalist, could have been president of FIFA once upon a time had he stood for election, which he didn't do, but in his time at FIFA, he ran the evaluation work for those countries bidding for 2018 and 2022, and you will probably be aware he had judged Qatar to be the most high risk of all the bids for the Olympic Games. As I say, he did consider standing against Sepp Blatter at one point, but his path took a different turn. He was dismissed by FIFA's ethics committee over an approach to the Qatari Aspire Academy that he made in the course of his time at FIFA. He is also the former president of the National Association of the Chilean Football. That is Harold Mayne-Nichols. Harold. Simon Johnson was the Chief Operating Officer for England 2018, one of the most highly regarded bids technically, you may remember, and yet humiliated in the voting, to put it frankly. It ended up with Russia taking the honours for 2018. As Sepp Blatter stated later, it was always going to be Russia, I think were his words. Well, Simon does still have a role with the English Rugby League as a non-exec director, but essentially is working at the moment as CEO of the Jewish Leadership Council. Just to point out that in terms of his background, his route to the posts of Director of Legal and Business Affairs at the Premier League and Director of Corporate Affairs at the Football Association was through his expertise as a sports and media lawyer. Simon, please join us. Andrew Jennings is, frankly, the most dogged, fearless, investigative journalist that I've ever met. He, alongside the man who is going to join us up on the platform, actually, have forged reputations as the great unearthers of truth, really, surrounding the biggest sports organisations in the world. They've been vilified for a lot of what they've done over many years. They've proved themselves right in many areas in the process as well. And since his first book, Foul, which highlighted decades of inappropriate behaviour, if I can use a rather modest phrase there, in world football, it has been something of a life's work for Andrew Jennings to expose corruption, bribery, self-enrichment of individual figures within sport. Andrew, thank you very much for being with us today. And Jens Weinreich is, as I say, like Andrew...
You can talk to me, I won't tell anybody.
An investigative sports journalist, twice named German Sports Journalist of the Year, among many other accolades, I should add. He's covered dozens of the biggest sports events in the world. He's revealed the truth around some of the critical aspects, particularly from a German perspective, of Germany's winning of the 2006 World Cup bid, much to everyone's surprise, and has been at the forefront of revelations, which frankly has served to shatter a lot of the complacency, I think, which has built up amongst the public and had built up among fans of the levels of allegations of wrongdoing in sport. Jens, thank you very much. Jens Weinreich. Hooray! So we've got quite a lot of ground to cover here, gents, and I think perhaps if we were to just say, let's focus on 2018, 2022, it would be difficult, not least, Harold, because it does feel as if there is something of a continuum. It's not an individual case here or there. Nonetheless, you took charge of that whole evaluation challenge, if I can put it that way, putting it together. What were the particular challenges and roles for you in terms of that evaluation that were fresh for 2018, 2022?
Mainly, we have to go and visit the countries and check that what they prepare on the bidding book, as we call it, when they wanted to bid for the World Cup. It was exactly the same that they will then show us. And then we have to compare what they show before when reality. And that was the main reason for our trip. We visit every country by 5 days, I would say, and we have a lot of meetings with people from the Football Federation, from the government, from the Congress, and also we have the chance to visit the country a little bit more. So at the end, we have a very clear picture about what they were proposing and if that was online when what we were seeing there.
And in terms of the effort put into those bid books, how impressive was the work done across the piece?
The books? The books was very impressive. It seems that they put a lot of energy there and a lot of professional work, and they were quite good books. You know, in all the 9, there were 11 countries bidding, but there were 9 bids because Portugal was together with Spain and Belgium was together with Holland. But they were really, really good. They did a wonderful job and they really were prepared to bid. That on the book side, let's say, on the theoretical part of the bidding was really, really good job.
And as you were looking at these bids and you were playing your role in that evaluation gathering or process, how much in earnest were you taking these efforts? Did you see it in a black and white sense as this is what is going to determine which countries get to the end of the line?
Not really. I was, before I was in 2004, the coordinator of the inspection group that we went to Africa for the 2010 World Cup. So at that time I realized that the work that we were doing, preparing the bid evaluation for the EXCO members to vote, was not necessarily the guide that they will be then later taking to vote. Most of them, they have their vote decided even before we went there. Then what I saw in 2004 was that what will help is that what we were evaluating when it was decided where would be the World Cup, at that time South Africa, then Russia and Qatar, will help FIFA and the LOC to work on developing what areas they were not covered enough. So more than an evaluation for the voting or for the deciding voting for the next World Cup, it was a work for, let's say, the operation and the logistics for the future. I would say I realized that in 2004, and so we knew that not necessary what we produce will be done. And then we produce these books. There are 9 and a summary. They were only 30 and they have a number inside, so we're not able to circulate 34. We did, and you can see there that's a number, so everyone knew who received it. And unfortunately, I talked to a lot of EXCO members after the voting, and I can say if they have it in their library, it's too much. I don't think they even opened the envelope, or they did not even look to the conclusions. They have their vote taken before we send them the report.
But you did send them the report?
Yeah, we sent them to everyone, and I checked personally that there were 22 members that were able to vote, so 22 people received this, and I checked one by one that they received it. After checking, I asked FIFA that we must put this on the web. It's still there. We did it already for 2004 for the first time. I also asked FIFA, we cannot keep this secret. We put it there, and this time again. Which was the difference between this and 2004? That here, let's say this way, we did a ranking. We put some risk. We clearly said to people, look, these are not good things, or these are excellent things in both sides. In 2004, they did not allow us to do it. In 2010, I pushed enough and that finished with this ranking that everyone knows who was the best and who was not the best.
And just to clarify on that, I know we're going back to old ground in a way, but that was a low risk, a medium risk, or a high risk you could...
Yeah.
That was essentially the
Yeah, they did not allow
categorizing
us. They did not allow us to go 1 to 100 or whatever. But at least that was, and of course, football people will understand immediately what means low risk and no risk.
Okay, Simon, I mean, none of this is new to you now, but let's just take us back a little bit to when Lord Treesman was saying we're going to run a campaign which is done right, basically. Did you not even then think that was, dare I say, that was naive? It was naive, it was probably a fruitless approach, given this continuum that Harold's already referred to, and the nature of the way these things do work.
Well, it's easy to look back now and describe it that way. I think at the time it's worth remembering that the FIFA had made a whole point to us that they were concerned about the reputation for the bidding from what had happened from 2006 and 2010. And that what they wanted to do was do a more comprehensive, more detailed, more objective bidding process than ever before. And we all were gathered in Zurich and addressed by Blatter and Valk and the people coordinating the bidding process and saying, we're going to need more information from you this time, and this is going to be a really thorough, objective and independent process. And to be fair to them, when they published the bidding guidelines, they were true to their word. We in the bidding countries had to produce a huge amount of information. I mean, our bid book was over 1,800 pages. We had to sign literally thousands of contracts for stadiums, hotels, and so on. And the criteria that they asked us to talk about were much more detailed than they'd ever been before. So it looked to us as the process started that they were doing what they'd said they would. There was one thing that, looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, we should have read more into, and that was when you looked at the rules of the bidding, it was absolutely clear that the executive committee had no obligation to take into account anything that the bidders had produced, not the inspection report, not the bid books, or so on. They had complete discretion to decide the outcome of the vote in the way that they wanted, on whatever criteria and issues they wanted. So if you're looking back,
they did nothing wrong not to open.
Well, they had no obligation to do so. We had to produce 32 copies of our bid books and contracts. They were all sent to FIFA. I know from my conversations that only 3 of the FIFA Executive Committee members asked for their copies of the bid books, and I know that 2 of those were Executive Committee members who belonged to countries that were bidding. So there was only 1 independent member who asked for them. So they had no obligation to take anything into account. So even when Harold's commission, which was not allowed to do a detailed ranking, a detailed grading, a detailed scoring, could only say, even for the very, very best bid, that it was low risk. That was all they could say. Even within the constraints that Harold's evaluation team had, the only bid that was indicated as high risk was Qatar. And therefore, you know, within the limited power that they had, there was a flashing amber light pointing at the Qatar bid from the inspection team saying, do not vote for this bid. And that's why I think the fundamental problem, therefore, with the whole process, apart from the fact they had 2 World Cups taken together, was the fact that it was complete discretion for the executive committee members to decide on whatever criteria were important to them.
And did you think with low, medium, high was a joke as a sort of categorization?
Well, we only found out that that's what would happen around October before the bid, after the whole process had taken place. And yes, I think at that point we realized that for all that work that we'd put in, for everything that we'd generated, for all the millions of pounds that had been spent on the technical side of the bid, all you could get was low risk. And that was in no way going to be a means of separating any of the bids from each other.
Andrew, you're twitching at some of the commentary, which I know you've heard many times before. But there are 1 or 2 things there which I might put to you, which is that by the letter of those laws, ExCo members didn't necessarily do that much wrong there. You might not like the way the system ran, but was it wrong?
Let's look at it this way. FIFA's bent. The executive committee was bent, and anybody who says they're not, I'll call a constabulary. All right, that's the police. Of course they were bent. There were 2 sorts. There were bent people like Jack Warner, Chuck Blazer, and so on. And there were the honest ones like what's his name, David Gill, who didn't say a word because after all he's on £300,000 a year. Does anybody here earn £300,000?
Just to be fair, David Gill was not on the executive committee at the time. It wasn't him.
Well, he's gone on since.
He's on since, but
He's gone on since and he's silent.
Well, just to be fair, he was not on that executive committee.
So, look, let me answer it this way. Damien, where are you? Put your hand up. Yes, Damien has to live by a particular route, and he just thrives because he's honest. It's called the Freedom of Information Act. Now, about 100 countries have the equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act, which means if you're a fan, and I can't see many here. Is there a fan here? Oh, there's one, yes. Sorry, Benita. It would be very, very simple with the amount of money at FIFA's disposal to set up an independent, truly independent and not picked by them, not the dodgy Michael Garcia, the dodgy Christopher Aubrey. I mean, what a joke these people are. Why doesn't somebody take a stand back and realise that if they're not bent, they're damn close to it, right?
Well, let's be a little bit careful about what you're saying about Garcia. As a person, I mean, you might agree that the report ultimately was a whitewash.
Well, that'll do. Whitewash, bent, what's the difference? Somebody's got to cut through some of this rather mannered summary and say the things I'm saying, and I've said for years, and I've published in books, which have done into thousands and thousands of copies around the world, about 16 different languages, which is a little more convincing than some of the others. So you've got two things. We must have a Freedom of Information Act, and if they don't like it, well, they can resign from FIFA. Because you know and I know, and anybody who bothers to look at the 209, is it, 210, whatever is this week's flavour of the month, that half of these bodies are nominated by the rulers of their countries. Well, to hell with them. If they're not from the fans, they don't count. And it'd be very, very easy if there was a new outlook at FIFA with a Freedom of Information Act, which you had to answer, ask reasonable questions, but sometimes a reasonable question isn't apparent at first. It becomes apparent later. And it could be independent, and it wouldn't cost that much compared with the sort of money they swill around. Secondly, I think it's time somebody said it. Now, can you come in close? The feds are coming! Oops, who said that? No, surely not. The feds are coming, right? Is that correct, Panita? Go on, say it, be proud. The FBI, and I've had my doubts, as I think any sensible person has, with their record over the years, but I can't fault them on the work they've done on FIFA. They're coming. Got it? They're going to be arresting people before the end of the year, and maybe before the end of today, because they're working on it. They've been working since 2009. I know, I was the first journalist who went and spoke to them, 3 different meetings, hour after hour after hour, they questioned me. And I thought, yeah, these guys are bright. I like them. And they're allowed to carry guns, so don't mess about with them.
Fair enough.
And the other thing is, I don't know why, this has been published in the New York Times. They are also investigating the IOC, which says, never forget, the IOC is not elected. They're better than you are. I mean, we still put up with an IOC that it chooses itself. And they're coming, sadly, for Lord Coe. How do I know? Because they've looked into the allocation of the World Championships to Doha. Surprised that, isn't it? Isn't that funny? No money involved there, eh? Yeah, did I hear a laugh somewhere? And Eugene, Oregon. What is the biggest business in Eugene, Oregon? You get one, yes, it's Nike. Who did all co-work for? we work for Nike. Well, I can't prove anything, but it does make you a bit suspicious. But no doubt people will still go on saying, well, he's a lord, for God's sake, he must be all right.
Well, I wouldn't say he's all right because he's a lord necessarily, but I would just add that he's not here and he's not going to reply to
Yeah,
that.
but he
Now, I'm
doesn't
bound to
answer
say-
emails, David. There comes a time when you put all the questions and they don't answer them, and you don't still say, well, on the other hand, Hitler didn't answer it. We must give him a right of reply. However,
Seb Coe's been linked to many people in his time. I'm not sure that's one of them. Jens, I want to turn to you. Just before I do, though, I think we've got a graphic to show, which I think is useful, which is the votes awarded to Qatar, in fact, for winning the 2022 World Cup. Do we have that to show up on the screen? We do. Okay, so that's your pack of 14 in the cards there. But Jens, I think one of the things that jumps out of that list is that there are different ways of persuading, of winning people over, and if we're dealing with an issue which is as big as a World Cup, it involves countries, it involves governments. You can't say, can you, across the piece, as long as you're bidding, you can do no trade with other countries. So how do you decide what is and what is not acceptable in terms of persuading an individual or a confederation to vote one way or the other?
If you don't have any rules, and FIFA did not have any rules at this time, you can do whatever you want. So then you got to have a kind of, I would say, bizarre tradition of producing beat books for 10 millions of euros or pounds, and a bizarre tradition of having, an evaluation commission, because at the end it is non-transparent and nobody is taking care of it. So it's within the system in FIFA and, by the way, within the International Olympic Committee as well. So that leads to the point that if you look back over the last 20 years in this bizarre bidding process, there were perhaps only one country or one city who has won an important bid for a mega event. Maybe two, but I tell you one example which has had the best bid. It was Salt Lake City in '95. So, and this is a joke for it. So it's very clear. So those criminals and mostly corrupt people, as we have seen on the screen, they can do what they want. They are above the law, and that is what happened in 2010 on 2nd of December, and that is what happened in the years before. That is what happened, for example, in 2015 at the IOC session, when the IOC session decided to give the Olympic Winter Games to Beijing. This is still the culture.
And within that culture, though, let me just be a bit more specific about, for example, the French vote or the Thai vote, where there were commercial deals done on a higher stage, weren't there, in terms of the provision of airplanes to the Emirates Airlines, or indeed there was a deal done with Thailand as well. How do you perceive the credibility of those deals?
This is, for me, I always consider that, and I use the phrase state corruption. This is exactly what Germany did, for example, to secure the World Cup 2006 as well, with an arms deal to Saudi Arabia and with other deals. This is a kind of state corruption. The point is what we witnessed in 2010 with the decision in Zurich. This was, I think, the biggest corruption decision ever in history of sport. The sheer level of money involved, what Qatar and Russia have paid for different deals, this was an absolutely new scale. And this has shocked many people, even people who were involved in other corrupt decisions in the years before. So this was a shocking decision. And there's only one good point. This has led to some changes. The culture has not changed, I would say. FIFA has not changed, but some rules were changed, and this has led to some changes also in the perception of the public. FIFA and the IOC, they have no trust in developed, or say in democratic countries worldwide, and you can see it on the result of different Olympic votes against a bid in different countries.
Okay, Simon, you want to let Simon come in, then you, Andrew.
It's a very important point that's been made. During the 2018 and 22 bidding process, the bid countries and their football associations were subject to very, very tight rules, pretty much for the first time. Nowhere near as tight as the IOC had, but much tighter rules. Contact with bidding companies, with EXCO members had to be reported and so on. And they were policed, and there was an ethics sort of form of ethics committee sort of policing it. What was fascinating was they didn't include at all in those rules governments or sponsors. Now, they could have easily done that because the government of a country had to sign a huge number of guarantee documents in order for the bid to be held to be compliant. And therefore, they could have put obligations onto a government, and they could have put obligations onto bid sponsors, particularly as FIFA had to approve every bid sponsor. And if you look back at what are the stories now of where most of the corruption came from, it came from governments and states doing deals with either their counterparts or the actual members of the EXCO, or sponsors of bids reaching arrangements with individual members and influencing their votes in that way.
Okay, so they could have done. Andrew.
I just wanted to add one point to Jen's splendid summation, and that was Mr. Dempsey. Do you remember?
Of course
Now,
I do.
You go on the FIFA Executive Committee. God, you're the most powerful man in the world. God, all the journalists, they're all queuing up. Oh, please, please, when are we going to get the answer? When are we get the answer? And they got the answer. Now, I can't remember the summary because I just think they're silly. Was it 23 members, 22 members, 24 members? But there was one missing. Surely not. Surely the epitome of your career is to cast your vote as you think you should. Where was Mr. Dempsey from New Zealand? Well, I'll tell you, because he came out, he was high above the sky, going like hell back to, well, he went to Kuala Lumpur, first of all. He didn't vote. Why didn't he vote? Well, if you believe him, and if maybe somebody's naive enough to believe him, then it's he has a terrible time in Zurich making up his mind. Nelson Mandela phoned him up. Oh, no, surely not. And then somebody sent him a joke from Switzerland, from Germany. A pound of sausages or a litre or whatever. And that was enough. There was too much pressure. He had to leave. Now, I don't know where he picked up that suitcase with $250,000 in it. I think it was in the cloakroom in the Boro Lac. No, it wasn't. It was the one on the top of the hill.
Dolder Hotel. The Dolder Hotel.
Correct, thank you. And he picked up his $250,000, which was fair enough, retirement present, and he headed out. And nobody said a bloody word. The journalist saying, excuse me, nobody said a word.
That is an allegation, Andrew, still, isn't it? It is
No, it's not an allegation. It's there in the IOC documents. Sorry, the ISL documents, a copy of which I have exclusively in my bag here. And he's dead as well, so I won't worry.
Well, that is a point.
But it's just unbelievable. I mean, again, so do you remember halfway through your bid, well, you only just got started, you had that meeting at the Intercontinental Hotel in London. You remember it well. We filmed it. We were outside, not at the time, but later for Panorama. When Mr. What was his name, the bid leader?
Andy Anson?
Andy Anson.
That's right. Mr. Anson confidentially admitted that he thought the majority of the FIFA executive were bent. However, now they're on the bandwagon, it was okay. Now, when it came to our film being transmitted, and those of you who don't live in this country perhaps don't know this, we came to do our film, and a few days before, the FA went to see the Director General. You can't show this film, it's unpatriotic. Unpatriotic. What did Jack Waller think of that?
Well, fair point. I would say this, which is just to come back and, in the sense of a certain sense of balance from an editorial perspective, that Lord Treesman did make a point that they were going to run a bid straight, and that
Look what
was
they
what,
did
and
to
they wanted
Jakeman.
to
They
run a
fitted
bid.
him up.
But they wanted to run a bid, so I think that's
But
important.
he did tell
let's
the
just
truth.
let's just move forwards a little bit, if we can, Harold, to the changes that have come in since, the efforts that FIFA has made to improve this bidding procedure.
Oh, please.
Significant?
Like what?
Well, I would say that there's a big change. There will not be the now called Council Executive Committee or whatever that was the EXCO before. Now we'll be voting the 211 or the countries that are allowed to vote. I think that improves a lot. Now, still, there's a lot of noise around. I follow it on the media. But I think that's, we are going back to the 60s or the 50s when all the FIFA Congress decide where will be the World Cup. Since Avalanche, they changed and only the EXCO decided. And I think that was a big mistake. And if you go down, Andrew already said it, the situation of Mr. Dempsey in 2000 changed everything on this bidding process.
He was the representative for Oceania.
Yeah, from Oceania, and he had an order from his confederations to vote for South Africa, and he left. And he decided that the 2006 World Cup will be in Germany. But then FIFA decided we will rotate the continents, the confederations. First will be Africa, that's a political decision. And then South America. Africa went more or less okay, but then South America, the confederation decide where the World Cup will be, not the EXCO. There was only one candidate for 2014, only Brazil. So there was no bidding at the end. And then FIFA said,
But there was surely money in the pocket of Teixeira and others.
well, that's,
You said there
I'm
wasn't.
talking about the bidding. And then they said, we will run again on the old way, that everyone is open to bid. And they decided to do with two bidding at the same time, which was the reason, commercial reason. Because I asked why we are bidding for two, because it's not fair enough for everyone. And they say, because then we can be sure that the TV contracts will be higher because we were dealing with two. Well, last November, they closed China. So that was not the reason. It was the reason that they wanted the power, this EXCO member. And then there was a new change. They said, okay, only 2018, only for Europe, and 2022 for the rest of the world. And that was the biggest mistake on the World Cup history. The other one was a very big one. This was because then they could do whatever they want.
Pandora's box was opened in a sense.
Yeah.
Yes,
And I mean, there's a short summary of all of those stories. I mean, the whole process is designed for the best way of corruption.
Yes,
Point.
yes.
So, and it is still there because for 2026, for example, US and Morocco, because the technical aspects do not decide. So that is the point, and that is a point I mentioned in the IOC Olympic decisions as well. You can easily design a transparent process focused on the technical aspects. It's easy. So many people outside, all over the world, experts, can do that. It's the technical things. And perhaps if you want, you can also have, let's say, 20% of the vote in a new system. You can let the Congress decide. But only 20% of 25% of the vote, because 75% or more have to be the technical details. No question at all.
Simon.
I would
No,
add
that
to
was the
that,
key-
that you
sorry.
have the situation where he wants to...
Can I just get Simon in?
45
Andrew?
hang
Hold
let
on.
me
If
make
you've got
this
time
point.
for that, we will.
We now have, what, 45 candidates in the future World Cup?
48. No.
Do you think Infantino's going to keep his job? Well, of course he is. I wish people would wake up a bit and look at the politics of FIFA.
We'll see that.
So the point again is correct, because you can have 2 people, 22 people, 24 people, 211 people, 2,000 people deciding on the outcome of the World Cup. If they do not have to take account of any of the technical information, if they are free to ignore the reports of the Evaluation Commission, then they are still free to do whatever deals they want. And it will be very interesting to have a look at how the votes fall for the 2026 vote, because I have a suspicion that they will still vote by confederation. They will still have their confederation meetings in advance of the FIFA Congress, as they always do now, and there will be a clear recommendation. And so the scope, therefore, for inappropriate influence to be applied on the voting still remains exactly the same as it was for the vote taken in 2010.
So, Harold, these changes are no change, basically, is the message that we're hearing on the panel.
I will never say that. There's a change. Perhaps what Jens says would be a much better situation. The technical reports, the guarantees, because it's not only the technical report, the guarantees from the government, a percentage of the Congress, and, well, that's okay. But changing from 22 to 211, there's a change. It's not the best one. We can still go improving. Perhaps he says that it's right, and it can be a very, very easy way of following the technical report, so everyone has the same rules. I can agree with that, but the worst thing is that a very small group of people take the biggest decision in the world of sports. I think, and now it's the FIFA Congress at least. I think it changed. About the confederations, I'm not so sure. I have heard a lot of times that all the confederations get together and they say we will follow this, and when they vote, they follow this other one. Football has, it's always changing. So we will see what happens, and it's very divided, but it's a little bit better. Can be even better, of course. What Jens is suggesting is a wonderful idea.
Okay, there's a bit of an agreement to disagree to a certain extent on that issue, but that is where we're going to have to call it to a halt as well. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. Harold, Simon, Andrew, Jens, for your expertise and your readiness to discuss the issue. Our panel, ladies and gentlemen. You'll be pleased to know it's lunchtime. So, bon appetit. We'll be back here at, thank you very much, 3:30, prompt start. Thank you very much.